Hello everyone, it is Joe here from Omnipoke, the channel that brings you guys everything Pokemon, and today we're going to be looking at the Nationals deck list from Alex Dow and Oliver Fenley. They were in the top 2 for Nationals, playing the card for card same deck. I don't actually have that deck list. I think Alex might be doing his own video on it or something like that relatively later on. But seeing as though Trump card is being rotated, I feel like he will be revealing that list at some point because the whole deck does revolve around Trump card being a major factor. So I don't feel too bad maybe spoiling a few things about his deck. I don't know it card for card, but I'm pretty close I think to the list, so hopefully this is going to be good viewing for you guys. Very consistent deck. We know Toad Shaymin is very, very strong, and basically let's get straight to it. So first of all, we're playing 3 Seismitoad EXs. The reason why we're playing 3 and not 4 is because we're never ever going to need 4 in the deck, and because we're trying to be as speedy and as consistent as we like with Shaymin, if we draw into that 3rd or 4th Seismitoad a lot of the time, we're not going to need it, and it's just going to be a card that we can't use. So if we have 3, that's 1 less dead draw for us, which is pretty good. And also, the fact is, we're using Trump card fairly frequently in this deck. We're probably using it 2 or 3 times in a game, at least once in a game. So if one of our Seismitoad does die, and like the other one's prized, or one of them's prized or something, we can still Trump card back fairly comfortably. So there's no real drawback to just running the 3 here. Of course, Seismitoad's our main attacker, Quaking Punching for 30 and Item Locking. So powerful, seeing as though we can mill through our entire deck and rack up the damage with lasers and muscle bands, and then Crushing Hammer our opponent so that they can do basically nothing the whole time. And you can see why this is already going to be a strong deck. Following up, we have 4 Shaymin EX. It's important to max this out, I feel. Setup is just too strong. You want to have it in your opening hand as often as possible. Drawing back up to 6, really powerful. Also, a 1 retreat cost isn't too bad. That Sky Return as well can help us bounce off Shaymins if we really need to. For the most part, we want to be Quaking Punching every turn though, however, so do be careful if you choose to Sky Return. It's probably best just to pay the retreat cost. But overall, Shaymin is pretty much the draw engine of the deck. Very easy to get set up, and we can mill for a lot of cards in a turn. In terms of the one-ofs, we have 1 Mewtwo EX in here. I'm not certain if Alex played this or not, Alex and Oliver, but Mewtwo can really help swing the Groudon matchup. X-Ball doing, I think it's around 140 or something against a Groudon, because they have to attach 4 energy, 5 if you put a Head Ringer on them. Also, we can start attaching multiple DCEs, and we can have Muscle Band onto the Mewtwo. So we can really stamp out the power of Groudon and force him to only have maybe 1 or 2 turns of attacking, rather than like 3 that could just absolutely run through our entire deck. So Mewtwo does sort of put a check to Groudon in a small capacity. Also, another thing that can really help out against Groudon is actually Jirachi. Jirachi very good against Groudon because we can Stellar Guidance into Lysanders on turn 2 so that we can stop them Primal Evolving, or on turn 1 even, if they're going first. So capturing up Groudons is probably the best way we can deal with the actual thing. So Jirachi is also very good against Groudon, so it's a good tech to have. In general, it's a good consistency booster, and it's also a great card for the mirror match. And this is the real reason why, is because we play 1 Getsis in here. I've spoken to Oliver and Alex both about their 1 tech Getsis, and they basically say it helps you win the mirror a lot. It can be 1 card out of your 59 card out of the 60 that can single-handedly win you games. There are times when your opponent will have nothing in hand, no answers, no supporters, especially more frequently because people are playing Shaymin now. People have less and less supporters in deck, and they normally just use stuff like Ultra Ball to find Shaymin, to find more cards, and eventually draw into their supporter. If we get to sing this away, our opponent's outs go from like all of those Ultra Balls and all of those Trainer's Mails and all of those Acrobikes and stuff to just down to the 3 or 4 Shaymin that they play and the 3 or 4 draw supporters that they play. So Getsis very strong in the mirror match. It gives you a lot of help if you're going second as well, because you can try and stop your opponent from doing too much else the following turn, especially if you're Quaking Punching as well, giving them a lot of dead draws for the rest of the game, which is pretty nice too. So Getsis, a very strong card. It's probably the reason why we saw the identical list do so well, because this 1 card, combined with Jirachi, just so powerful for the mirror match, which is all important, seeing as though Toad is everywhere at the moment. It's also really good against Trevor, They can still maybe get Wally plays off, but it's just going to ruin their overall setup, stop you getting head-ringed and stuff if you're going first. So a number of reasons why Getsis is really good in here. Just overall, really good disruption, searchable via Jirachi early on, so great against a lot of things really. So this one tech Jirachi, very, very important, namely to getting these two to help your matchups. So Lysander is for Groudon matchups, and Getsis is for the Toad Mirror and for Trevor. Next up, we have a 1-1 Slurpuff line. And Slurpuff, again, it can be a helpful ally in the mirror match. For the most part, our draw engine is trainer-based, other than Shaymin. And there's a lot of cards we can't use in the mirror match, so we'll be dead drawing often from our top deck. Using Slurpuff allows us to have an extra top deck each turn, essentially, with the tasting ability. So we'll be drawing into our supporters more frequently, such as you saw, the Lysander can be helpful. Zerosic and Flare Grunt are really, really helpful in the mirror match, trying to disrupt our opponent, get rid of their double colourless energies. So having extra tastings to try and get these out can really help in the mirror match. And even then, it's just helping you end-proof yourself throughout the game. We're normally going to... Oh, I've got a trade. That's for a 4-4 Lucha, so there's a video coming out later in the week for her Lucha Bats. That was led to top 8, I think, or maybe even top 4 at Nats. But anyway, talking about Slurpuff for now. Tasting really helpful. It helps you end-proof yourself. This deck is pretty fast and aggressive, but normally it does its sort of aggressive drawing in the opening 2 or 3 turns rather than throughout the game. Because after those initial 3 or 4 Shaymin drops, then you're reliant on stuff like Super Scoop Up, which isn't always going to hit to help you draw. Whereas Slurpuff allows you an extra 1 card each turn at least. Even though it's a 1-1 line, I really like it in here. Not too clunky, again. I'm going to say how we try and be as streamlined and as clunk-free as possible in here. So we're trying to keep the Slurpuff as minimal as possible, but even then, the 1-1 just gives you so many benefits. A lot in the mirror match it can help as well. So as you can see, we've got Getsis for the mirror. We've got Jirachi to search these things out. We've got 2 or 3 or 4 even, you could say, tech supporters for the mirror match. And we have Slurpuff to help us draw into them more frequently. So it's no wonder that Alex and Oliver did so well with this sort of deck. So there are the Pokemon, only 11 in the deck. You can see, again, streamlined, trying to be as consistent as possible, getting this starting out like this, so that's pretty good. Onto the trainers, we've got Comp Search, again, just the big consistency booster. Can search out anything you want. The only card in the game, other than Teammates, I think, that can search DCE, so pretty useful to have that. Then we have one switch in here. There's going to be times when you don't start Seismitoad, definitely because we've gone down to 3 instead of 4. Also, if you are starting with Seismitoad and you've been head-ringed or something like that, and your Super Scoop-Ups aren't coming off, it's good to have a guaranteed way of moving your guy. Also, you can use it combined with Slurpuff. If you're really digging for cards, you can switch into your Slurpuff that normally will have a Floatstone on it so that we can free retreat again, but the tasting gives us an extra card when Slurpuff is in the active, so a lot of good uses for switch in here. We also have the 4 Super Scoop Up. This is probably the biggest card and one of the reasons why Trump Card has been banned recently. Just a quick side note on that, I will be continuing to profile decks with Trump Card in until the 20th or the 15th of June, I think it is. It cuts out in the UK, so I'm going to in America and Europe. So I'm going to continue to do Trump Card based decks until that point where it's actually no longer legal, because I know there are people who are going to be testing for their nationals which are before the ban of Trump Card, so I think it's still important to give you guys the most current information around decks right now, and we'll approach how decks change upon that date. So for now, we're using 4 Super Scoop Ups. It helps us respam the Shaymins for crazy starts. It's also good for getting Jirachi comboing again. In the mirror match, it means that you can get a second Stellar Guidance. After you've done your Getsis play, you can go for one of these Zerosics or Flare Grunts. So very, very good at locking down that matchup if you can hit Super Scoop Ups in your first couple of turns. Also really good for healing your Seismitoad. A lot of the time under Trainer Lock, these decks are going to be missing KOs on you, and Super Scoop Up can mitigate that damage altogether. You rebench and you reattach for your turn, and you've got Toad back in a state as if nothing's happened to it. So really, really useful to keep spamming this and Trump Card while you still can, guys. Onto the other main card, and the main reason why this deck is really good. We're able to respam Crushing Hammer. We're maxing it out in here, trying to stop our opponent from playing pretty much altogether. Really, really helpful against pretty much every matchup other than Toad and Trevor, I guess. Even against Trevenant, you can Lysander around Trevor and then try and use Crushing Hammers to slow them down a bit, force them to miss turns of attacking. So Crushing Hammer pretty helpful in every matchup. I guess Groudon is sort of useless, but that's about it. Other than that, it's like the main card you're going to want to look for. Additionally, we're going to want to spam lasers, of course. We have Seismitoad poking for 30. It goes up to 50 with Muscle Band, but the laser bank is really the main source of our output here. We're increasing it to 80, and then if they stay in the active position, it goes up to 110, so that then the following Quaking Punch, if they're still poisoned, will actually get a knockout. So essentially Toad is two-shotting as long as they're poisoned, so it's very important to keep this around. Also on that heads tails flip, if you get heads on the laser and your opponent flips tails on sleep, they can often find it very difficult to do anything at all that turn, and again it makes it awkward for a lot of decks, so really good to have this in here as well. Next up we have 4 Trainers Mail. Pretty obvious, we're running 45 trainers altogether, so Trainers Mail is pretty much always going to net you 2 to 3 cards to choose from, and this is really helpful finding the pieces that we need at the right times. Namely, we're going to try and look for Ultra Ball, Super Scoop Up, or Hammers or Lasers if we're needing to get extra damage or something like that. So for the most part, Trainer's Mail really helps you keep ticking over through the deck, and it just is a great consistency booster overall. Next up, with maxing out the Ultra Ball. It's our main out to Jirachi and Shaymin, really important, and as well, it lowers the hand size in other matchups. It's quite important in the Toad Mirror again. I'm going to keep talking about Toad Mirror because it is one of the things you're going to need to know if you're going to play this deck, because it's going to be a very popular deck. Ultra Ball can really help in your opening turn to get rid of other trainers that you're not going to need later on. For example, if you're going first, you can Ultra Ball away stuff like Crushing Hammer, which would otherwise clunk your deck. So really good at declogging the deck and lowering the hand size for Shaymin, as well as actually searching it out. So we need to max this card out. We've also maxed out VS Seeker. We are milling through like crazy, so it's always good to keep track of our VS Seeker count so that we can always use Trump Card so that we don't deck out. Also, respamming these supporters, really good if you can recover these in the mirror matches at some point. If you can either Lysander around Trevor, and then VS Seeker to grab back maybe Lysander, maybe even one of these other ones that you would want. Pretty important, so for the most part, VS Seeker just really, really important, especially because we have so many one-offs of like sort of techie supporters in the deck. So onto these techie supporters, I've already breezed over Getsis, really crucial card for the mirror match. This is probably the reason why Alex and Oliver did so well, like I say. As well as the fact that they're both really good players, but this card is a real ace in the hole to have in the mirror match, so really good to add this card. Definitely, if you don't agree with anything else in this list, definitely have a Getsis in your deck now. We're having the 2 Lysander, I like it at 2. We've got VS Seeker to respam. It's useful in a multitude of situations. Like I say, picking off Groudon turn 1 or 2 before they go into their Primal, very, very helpful, because you can pretty much make that one useless and then have to deal with just 1 Mega Groudon, or maybe even none, because from then on you'll be using Quaking Punch, and then you can start putting Headringers on the second one that they have to search out. So Lysander very helpful for Groudon and everything else pretty much as well, for helping you get prizes and slowing people down, etc. Next up we have Trump Card. We absolutely need this, recycling all of our stuff. We can see why it's going to be banned. This is probably one of the main reasons why the card is going to be banned, because we can respam Super Scoop Up, Crushing Hammer, and Laser, which is all very, very strong in combination with Trainer Lock and this sort of deck build. Next up, we've got 3 Juniper. I think 4 is too many, to be honest. We don't want to keep drawing into... Like I say, we're using Shaymin so hard to aggressively search the deck. We don't want to be drawing into too many supporters. We do play a fair few, but in low counts, so we can just get rid of them when we need to. And just drawing into multiple Junipers is just awkward, so I like having it at just 3. We're playing a single N. It's your comeback card in a lot of situations, so it's good to have. And it's also disruption. If you know your opponent's like been able to grab a supporter with a Jirachi or something like that, you can end them away and force them into more awkward hands. Because you're trainer locking as well, they're going to have a lot of dead cards in their deck, so end can be really powerful for you. We also have the Flare Grunt, very helpful against pretty much anything. It's an extra guaranteed discard if you're crushing hammers or flipping tails, or if you can't find access to them for whatever reason. It's a guaranteed one, which is quite nice. It's really good against Trevenant because they can actually out-hit us, because they hit 460 with their attack and 220 snipes. And because we don't have, sometimes we don't even have Muscle Band attached if they've been able to go first and use a Wally. And we're not able to use our lasers either. So we're only poking for 30, whereas he's poking for 60 if this is Trevenant. So we need to try and rebalance that scale by forcing them to miss certain turns of attacking. And Flare Grunt can allow us that. Also, it's really good for the mirror match as well. So Getsis, this Flare Grunt is good throughout the game as well. Maybe not opening turns, but it's good at some point to try and force your opponent to miss a turn of Quaking Punch. If you can force that out of your opponent, you're probably going to win the mirror match. So it's good to have that in there. We've also got the Zerosic. It's useful for a multitude of reasons. Gets rid of headringers on yourself, which is good. It gets rid of other tools that your opponent's been able to play before we get a Quaking Punch off, so that then we can replace it with a headringer. It's useful for getting rid of energy, again, getting rid of Trevenant's double colourless energies or Seismitoad's double colourless energies. Very, very nice. And yeah, that's pretty much it. We can also get rid of Garb. Garb isn't too big of a deal. It does shut down our Slurper throughout the game. But for the most part, our Shaymins and Jirachi, they're going to be used too early for Garbodor anyway. But it's still something to note, I guess. Next up, we're playing 2 Verbank. Even though it is really, really crucial, it's also a dead draw. So we just want to have 2 of it. Trust me, guys, you will be able to find Verbank if you're really digging through the deck just for this card. We have 4 Trainer's Mail to help us search it out. We have all of this draw. You'll see it in a moment that we probably won't struggle to find this card, but it's still really crucial to help our lasers do more damage. It also bounces stuff like Silent Lab, which I saw a few Seismitoad players actually tech into their own deck to try and slow down in the mirror match. I know that Ryan Morehouse, he played Silent Lab in his own Toad Shaymin list. It's pretty much a double-edged sword, and I don't really like it in here, but it's something that some people are using because it can really shut down in the mirror match. You're able to do your entire setup, then you just drop Silent Lab to finish your turn, and then the opposing player can't use their own Shaymins unless they have access to stadiums. Nevertheless, I still like it at 2. For the most part, you're not going to get Silent Lab dropped on you, and even if you do, you can use your supporter-based draw or your Trainer's Mail to try and find the Verbank as quickly as possible. Next up, we got the 2 Float Stones. It's helpful for retreating out of whatever we want on our first turn, so that we can actually Quaking Punch no matter what. And it's also really good. Slapping it on Slurpuff is the best, pretty much, so that we can freely retreat into this whenever maybe Seismitoad is knocked out, or just if we use a Super Scoop Up even, we can get an extra card from Tasting, and then we can replay our Toad, reattach, and attack again. So very, very nice having the 1/1 Slurpuff to help us, and the Floatstone allows that combo to work very nicely. Next up, we got the 3 Muscle Band. Muscle Band for helping us do output with Toad. It's also used so that we can't get headringered for the most part. In the mirror match, if you're going first, you want to get your Muscle Band more than a lot of things, really. Because then you don't have to worry about headringer. You only have to worry about laser, which is still an issue. But it's at least one thing that your opponent can't play. And it's an extra card that's stuck in their deck for the whole game as well to force them into dead draws. So Muscle Band really helpful for output and stopping people using their own headringers in the mirror. We are playing 2 of our own headringer. I've just said how disruptive it can be to Toad. That's why we're playing it, basically. We can also put it on things like Shaymins on our opponent, so that they can't use Sky Return, so it's essentially stuck there. Seeing as though we're using so many hammers and so many cards like Zerosic and Flare Grunt, we can force our opponent into a situation where we've got Shaymin active. It can always retreat, but it can never use Sky Return to escape. And if they're going to pay their energy just to move, it's sort of a catch-22 situation where they don't really want to retreat into anything else that's just going to get lasered and hit with a Quaking Punch, because they don't actually have energy left on their field. So they end up just sticking with Shaymin in the active position and giving us 2 prizes. So Headringer really allows that combo to work very nicely. It's great as well against all Mega decks, basically stopping them getting their Spirit Link, forcing a turn where they have to spend just to Mega up, or they just can't use the Mega that game, really. It's also great against Groudon, buys you an extra turn, which is very, very helpful. Every turn matters against Groudon for the Toad player, so that's very nice. It's also an extra energy for Mewtwo, so it fuels that attack. Headringer really helps out in a lot of situations. Finally, we've just got the 4 DCE. It's all we need. It's the cost for X-Ball, it's the cost for Sky Return, it's the cost for Quaking Punch. So that is all we're going to do here. So let's, I think I've got it saved already, but we will head into a game here, and I imagine people will be scooping to us all day and all night, but hopefully we'll get a good game in. Like I say, this is not the exact list from Alex and Oliver. However, I feel like it's pretty close based on what I heard and what I could see in the games that they were playing in the top cut. So hopefully this is going to be a pretty useful deck for you guys. It's definitely one you're going to have to test against as well if you don't want to play this deck. So we've found our first game against Zekromd, which is a nice name, I think. And we're going to flip some coins, and we're going to get to go first. This is actually something we don't really want if we're in the Shaymin Seismitoad mirror match. But I think if you don't know what your opponent's playing, it's still worth going first, in my opinion. So we start with 2 Shaymins, which isn't fantastic. I think we're actually going to have to Juniper away almost turn 1 here. We do have Getsis, but I feel like it's way too risky to use it this turn. We could bench a Shaymin just for the sake of having a bench slot there, because we might be forced into a Sky Return at a later point. It's also like a super scoop up target, so I will bench it even though we're not going to draw from it, and then just go for the Juniper. No targets for our hammers just yet, or our Headringer, so we can happily dump those away. We'll get them back with Trump Card, no worries about that. So here we can find Seismitoad and Swirlix. We can put a Muscle Band onto our Seismitoad. We can play our first Trainer's Mail, and we're going to grab an Ultra Ball here. And then we're going to get rid of Laser and Trainer's Mail so that we can find another Shaymin. We need to keep Floatstone around because I kind of want to put it on the Shaymin, but it's also the Swirlix I'd like to put it on. I think I'm going to put it on the active just to be the safest, really. And then we can set up for 6. You can already see the ruthless speed and consistency of this deck working. We can use another Trainer's Mail here. There's not much we really need. I might just grab Verbank for next turn. I guess we could grab Ultra Ball and then simply Ultra Ball Fail Search so that we can use our other Shaymin. That might not be a bad idea. I think we can go for that quite comfortably. So I'm going to Ultra Ball away our other Ultra Ball and Muscle Band. We don't need them. And we're going to fail the search. And then we can go for Shaymin for 6. For 4, sorry. Putting ourselves back up to 6. Here we can use a Super Scoop Up. It does get a Heads. I'm really tempted to pick this one up now. And just go into the Swirlix. I think that's our best play. Because then we can have the Floatstone on the card that we really want it to be on. We can also use a Laser now. And I'm sort of tempted to put the energy on the board. However, it can be an issue for us. I don't think he's going to play too many hammers himself, because it looks like it is a Groudon deck of sorts. I don't know if he's also playing the Primal or not, or we're just against a fairly new player. I think it's fairly safe to attach a DCE. I think we have more outs to finding more DCE rather than more switching cards, because we've already played a Floatstone. So we can just put Verbank into play and then pass the turn. Our opponent is asleep for the turn, and already we've got a complete setup on our side of the board, and we have options for next turn. So this is looking great for us. We also have Lysander, which is big if he's able to find a Groudon EX. However, it looks like our opponent was forced to just attach and pass. Pretty horrible from him, but we're not going to rest here. We're going to carry on trying to get an even stronger board state. We don't need to use any of these lasers. I don't think we need to do anything. I don't have to be cautious about any of those attacks. I think they're fairly weak. So we can just go for Juniper here and look for some more cards. We do find Slurpuff, so that we can draw 2 more cards even. And we can go for Trainer's Mail. I don't really see what I'm digging for other than more Crushing Hammers. I think... oh, it won't allow me to look at the whole deck, it's just a Trainer's Mail. So I will just grab Comp Search here. I think we still should have some Crushing Hammers in the deck. I'm going to get rid of Super Scoop Up and N. And we're going to look through the deck properly this time. So we do still have 1 Crushing Hammer. I'm going to grab that. And we're going to play it. That is a heads, so our opponent's back down to no energy. We can retreat freely and go for the Quaking Punch for our first prize of the game. And our opponent has no plays next turn, and we're in great shape again. We're still in fantastic shape here. So we see a Flare Grunt from our opponent, some sort of counter, but we do already have 2 DCE in hand. We've been able to hold them fairly nicely. We see another DCE from our opponent actually, and that's not really going to phase us here. We can go for VS Seeker, and we're just going to go for Flare Grunt. We don't actually have Trump card in our deck, so I don't want to mill too much anymore. I don't think it's even worth going for Tastings at this point. But we're still in great shape. And you can see already, if Trump card wasn't a thing, I'd have to be cautious for the rest of my game now. And I'd have no more Crushing Hammers and no more lasers. But because Trump card is a thing, even though it's in my prizes right now, it would mean that I could push for game next turn. We're going to see a Center Lady. So our opponent's back up to full health and they have a strong energy. I think it's safe just to go for Quaking Punch here. We don't need to Juniper for anything. It'll just put us on a clock even more. So for now we have 9 more turns to try and find Trump card from the prizes. I don't think that's too worrying, to be honest. We just see a pass from our opponent. And we can go for VS Seeker for, again, that Flare Grunt doing the work. Stopping our opponent doing absolutely anything that they want, and we can just go for Quaking Punch again. And now our opponent's 1 turn away from losing. Albeit it was a bad deck to play against. Like, we don't often see that Groudon in competitive play. But even so, we would have stopped pretty much any deck from playing. And stopping him use things like Ultra Ball meant that he got benched early on. So let's try and find 1 more game with this deck. I don't actually like playing it too much because it is just so mean to people. You can see that Trump card got banned because this is just not fair, and it is very much one-sided fun when you play this deck. We're having all the cards to use, our opponent can use maybe 1 card a turn and pass, and that's pretty much not how Pokemon's meant to be played. But while Trump card is still around, I suggest you guys capitalize on it if you are going to any national events anytime soon. I think it's every nationals other than like Canadian nationals, from the top of my head anyway, that will be able to use Trump cards. So this is definitely the main deck that you're going to see, and it's obviously very threatening. So we're going to see some sort of Blastoise deck, and this is something that can actually pose some threat to Toad, because they'll be able to out-attach our Crushing Hammers. It looks like our opponent's playing the Frost Prison Articuno as well. And this could be awkward because we can get paralyzed, and we don't play too many switching cards other than these Super Scoop Ups. So we're going to go for Laser here on the Squirtle. It would be fantastic if we could knock this out this turn, because then the Articuno at least can't use Frost Prison next turn. So here we're going to Ultra Ball, and we're going to find a Shaymin, I think. Actually, I think it's fine to just go for Seismitoad here. It's kind of more risky, but we're still getting 7 from Juniper, and that'll probably give us outs like Ultra Ball or Trainer's Mail. So we actually drew so dead. Wow, that is incredible how dead we just drew. So we can't actually do anything this turn. That's disgusting. We have so many good outs in the deck, and we just couldn't find any. I'm going to Crushing Hammer away the water energy there. And this is why you can see we just drew into our 2 other Junipers. That's just plain bad luck, but if you played 4, it would happen more often. So somehow we were able to miss all of our Ultra Ball, all of our Super Scoop Up, and all of our Trainer's Mails. Pretty poor luck on our side of the board there. But our opponent now is able to use Trainers, and there's the Candy Blastoise. And seeing as though we couldn't lock our opponent for the turn, it's just going to mean a lot of bad news for us, to be honest. I could have gone for that Shaymin play earlier and held off on the Seismitoad just for more cards, I guess. But I felt that it was pretty safe still with Juniper. I think you probably all would have made the same play as me there. I mean, looking for the Shaymin just means we need to find one more Ultra Ball anyway to find Seismitoad, so we'd be in the same situation, I think. We see an Ultra Ball for a Jirachi as well for a Sycamore for the following turn. And I think the Stoice is still fairly stuck. Yes. So at least Blastoise is stuck here. We can go for Super Scoop Up. I wish we had top decked that earlier. It does get ahead, so we can save our Shaymin for a little bit. I think benching Mewtwo is actually going to be helpful, because this Articuno does look like it's going to be sucking up energy as long as the Blastoise is around. So we can bench that, attach a Muscle Band, and Shaymin for 3. Now we can go for an Ultra Ball play, getting into another Shaymin. We know our opponent's hand is just a Sycamore as well. We can go for another Super Scoop Up. It's good to get it out of the hand early, because if it's a Tails, it's a -1 for the other Shaymin that we had. And if it's Heads, like I say, we can still go for this. We've got a DC so that we can actually attack. Headringer is a bit late to the party because this Articuno will be able to attack. So I may as well drop it from the hand just so that we can get more from this Shaymin. And we find Floatstone, which isn't too bad. We can't get this again, it's just the Sycamore, so we can attach this Floatstone to one of these Shaymins and just go for the Sycamore, the Juniper here. We're looking for more lasers really, and some Crushing Hammers. We do find Laser, we also find Trainer's Mail, that can get, I think they're both pretty dead cards here. I think I'll just grab Headringer for future turns. We can go for another Trainer's Mail, and we do draw into some Crushing Hammers, which is useful. Even though Comp's there, I think Crushing Hammer's the card I would have to comp for anyway. So we'll just grab that. It is a Tails, but we can laser this Blastoise, trapping it in the active. So although he's going to get usage out of it, we've got Headringer for any other things he wants to put down and start attaching to. And I feel like we can deal with this Articuno fairly easily at some point. We see him top deck a Squirtle and then go for that Sycamore. This Blastoise is going to die coming back into our turn as well if our opponent doesn't have something like a Rough Seas. We see another attachment onto Articuno. And our opponent just passes. And we take our first prize. And now our opponent's in a real tough spot where they want to go. They go into the Squirtle. Here we can go for Zerosic Headringer. Or we can just try and Lysander it up for some damage. It's going to do 80 and auto paralysis. We don't have any way of getting out of our paralysis. So it might not be the best option to go into here. We could go into we could capture out the Deoxys for 2 prizes. I think that's what I want to do. Because it buys us more turns as well. He'd have to have DCE, and he's already playing Water and Plasma Energy, so I doubt he has any. And if he starts going into Wartortle before Blastoise, we can prepare for that. So I'm fairly happy just to go for the Ultra Ball here and try and find another Shaymin. We actually, yep, there he is. We've prized our Swirlix this game, so Slurpuff's not going to be too helpful. I'm going to bench another Seismitoad, attach to him. We can put another Ringer on the board just for the sake of Ringer. and we can draw 6 here. We want to find more Crushing Hammers. We do miss all of those. I can go for Comp Search, I think, is probably the best thing here. Let's go for a Super Scoop Up first. That's a Tails. Now I can comp. He's not happy with the deck. Profile for YouTube, mate. I wouldn't be playing this if I didn't have to. Trust me, mate. Yeah, it's upsetting on both parts, really, having to play this deck. I played Jake Wolvin, who top 8'd with Seismitoad, and he just felt so bad the whole day. He beat me 2-0, and he was flipping well, to be sure. But even when he was missing flips and stuff, he was like, I feel so bad playing this deck. I don't think anyone feels too great when they're playing or taking part in either playing or playing against this deck. But again, Trump Card has made this a thing, so we're going to have to just deal with it. So I'm going to Comp Search now. I'm just going to go for VS Seeker so that we can grab Trump Card, because we have no more resources in deck. So here we are. We will use our Trump Card. And he's trying to play Rogue. We see Wartortle and then the Keldeo. These are both issues for us. But we had the Trump Card there regardless. We're going to hold on to that DC in hand in case he wants to, I don't know, Catcher to try and stall, or so that we can attach to Mewtwo to deal with this Articuno at some point. But here we're just going to go for the Quaking Punch. We're not in the best of shapes, to be honest, because we missed that turn 2 of attacking. We allowed so much for our opponent to do. He's still chatting away to us, unfortunately. But we'll see. And he's still chatting away. I'd like him to start playing some cards, but I imagine he can't play too many. And he's still trying to say something. He cute. He's obviously trying to type something that Pokemon doesn't like. He's probably chanting Digimon or something like that. So we see the Russian retreat on the Keldeo, and we are paralyzed now. And we actually topped that Juniper. We needed that. I can't tell you how much we needed that, to be honest. So he was asking about the channel, so there you go. That's nice. We can do some plugging of ourselves. We will use a Juniper. And we've got Super Scoop Ups. I think they're better to play, even though we have the auto switch, because it means we can recover Muscle Band. Actually, you know what? I think it's best just to use the switch, because we still have the 2 resources for next turn. So we'll play the switch. And we're going to try and train his mail into some more Crushings. That's all we need, basically. He does have Wartortle, but without any way of searching Blastoise, I don't know how many he plays. But with so many cards, I don't think he can play more than like 3. So we can just Quaking Punch here, limited in our damage output, but it's really the only thing our opponent has going for them. So he has a Lysander. He interestingly goes for Mewtwo here and hits us for 120, paralyzing again. So we can go for our first Super Scoop Up. That is a Tails. Now we're really crossing our fingers. And that is indeed a Heads, which is very nice for us. We can go back into this Toad and attach that Muscle Band. And then we can go for, I think, Flare Grunt is the best here. We're going to get rid of a Water Energy and just go for the Quaking Punch again. I'm hesitant to rebench that Mewtwo because I want space for another Shaymin or Jirachi for next turn. I think we'll have to Jirachi into like a Juniper. So that's what we're doing. keep chatting to our friendly new subscriber. Thanks for joining the team, Soundcat. You're very welcome here. He's glad by the rotation at least. So that's someone. I'm going to be doing a video about the rotation fairly soon. And he scooped to us. I think that's fair enough. We could see what was happening. His deck actually had a lot more answers to Toad than a lot of others because it has built-in energy acceleration via Pokemon. Whereas other main meta stuff like Groudon and Rayquaza, they use stuff like Mega Turbo. Other than that, they're sort of stuck at one attachment per turn. So that is Seismitoad based off of Alex and Oliver's lists. I will say that I haven't seen the card for card list and it could be wildly different, but based on what I heard from across the day, like I say, I played against Jake and he came top 8, so it's at least a very good list, I would say, of how to play this deck if you're going to any nationals while Trump Card is still legal. If Trump Card is not legal, I think I'm going to have to do another video with Seismitoad. I think Seismitoad Shaymin can still work, sort of, but you'd have to probably cut Shaymin down to like 3 or 2 and have a slightly higher Slurpuff line so that you don't completely mill yourself the whole game. I think Toad is very reliant on Trump Card right now in this sort of build, but that's not to say that Quaking Punch isn't going to be really strong regardless. Seismitoad was strong before Trump Card was released, so there it is, guys. I hope you enjoyed, and I'll be coming to you with more top 8 players list from UK Nationals, so that if you guys are going to Nationals anytime soon, it should be a good basis for you to go off of. So, like I say, I've been Joe from Omnipoke, and I will see you guys next time.